Welcome to chapter 3. My goal with you today is just to sort of explain and introduce to you something called process costing. And we'll save all the fun stuff for next week because there is a lot of work to do on the back side of chapter 3. So we'll wait until after you're done with your first exam for that. Okay, so process costing is used when companies have similar products that are mass produced. Okay, and so whether it's Kellogg's or General Mills that's doing cereal, or whether it's Sherwin-Williams doing paint, or whether it's USX that's manufacturing steel products, or ExxonMobil that's refining oil into gasoline, or Coca-Cola or Pepsi that's basically producing soda. These are all similar products. You can't tell one bottle of soda from another, for the most part. It's a mass production. So one bottle of Coke looks like another bottle of Coke. And these things are done in a continuous fashion. So the manufacturing process for this is, there's usually some type of blending going on. So there's the actual creation of the beverage. And then there's another part of the automation line that fills up containers, automatically puts caps on them and slaps a label, on them. Or it's filled and capped, and then it goes over to packaging where that process puts the cap on it, maybe puts another label on it, and puts it into some type of, box or strings it up with plastic or something like this. So the process is the same, for all of these. And so process cost system is really used for this. Again, we were looking at in chapter 2 the job order cost system, which, as you know, is done by job, right? And so specific movies are costed out, specific medical care is costed out accordingly. But process cost systems are quite popular as well. Again, whether it's for soft drinks or oil or computer chips or chemicals, it's one long continuous process until, a bottle of soda pops out, or, some type of other product pops out. And so these are just examples of companies that use different systems. Okay. And again, what's important to understand in a process cost system, they all have characteristics, which basically is once they're produced, once the production begins, it continues until the finished product out. So once they start pouring in the water, sugar, flavoring, they're going to do the blending, the bottling, the labeling, and then you're going to have a Coke or a Pepsi product at the end of it, right? So that's the finished product. Once a bottle of Coke or Pepsi pops out, you can sell it. It's not it's done. So unlike work in process that you saw, which takes a little bit of more different time for some manufacturing, this production line, just once it starts, it spits out a finished good. Okay. Again, one of the other characteristics is it's a continual process of producing what we call homogeneous products, same types of products, right? Homo is same. So so producing the same type. So Coke is Coke. I mean, oil, gasoline is gasoline. So it's producing the same type of product through the process. Okay. And basically speaking, another characteristic of this is once the finished product is created, Basically, the same amount of materials, labor, and overhead are used to produce each product. So one bottle of Coke has the same amount of materials, labor, and overhead used to produce it as the next bottle of Coke. And so all of these are true. What's not true about process cost systems is why D was selected here, is because when you're producing different when you're producing different products, you're going to have, it's not going to be a process cost system. It's not going to be used. You're going to most likely use job cost order system. Service companies also use process cost systems if what they do is repetitive. Okay, if what they do is repetitive. I'll give you examples of that, I will. If you go to a Jiffy Lube, I know we have some Haviland oil changes, but Jiffy Lube and Haviland are basically the same. All they do is, they do oil changes, right? I mean, it's basically you pull your car in, they'll change your oil, put fluids in, etc. It's a very repetitive process, so that would be perfect for a process cost system. They don't have to do it per customer. They're basically doing the same thing for each customer. They're changing their oil, putting a new filter in, putting fluids in. So there's no need to keep track of the cost per job. So job order costs just wouldn't make any sense there. But process cost systems would. Same thing for H&R Block. If you just go, or any of the other tax services around tax time, they're basically spitting out general forms, right, for federal income taxes and state income taxes. It's the same over and over again. They're not doing anything really special or unique for the most part. They're basically, everyone has to fill their taxes out and file taxes to get a refund. So using a process cost system for an H&R Block or other tax business would be reasonable to do. Okay. The book also shows you how job order cost systems and process cost systems are the same and how they're different. Okay. And so, as you know, a job order cost system will assign the costs per job. You just saw that from chapter 2. And the products are unique. They have unique characteristics. That's the heterogeneous products that they were talking about in the previous slide. For a process cost system, again, costs are also tracked, but they're tracked through different departments or different parts of the manufacturing process. So we do still track costs. We just do it differently, and you're going to learn that in this chapter. But the products that are ideal for process costs they're uniform. They're basically the same types of products, and they're produced in very, very large volumes. Okay, and so this is these are important differences to note. This is how some of those differences look in a diagram when you're looking at the cost flow. Again, chapter 2 looked at job order costing. Right, we start with direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. We assign those costs to work in process inventory per job, right? Once those jobs are done, it gets moved to finished goods inventory. And then once those finished goods are sold to customers, it's cost of goods sold. Okay, so this was chapter 2 stuff. Now you're going to look at there's really one difference to look at in the process cost flow system. Everything still starts with direct labor, direct materials, manufacturing overhead. Except when they're allocated now, they're allocated to department, okay? So there's going to be some materials, labor, and overhead directed to each department. In many instances, what Department A does is a portion of the work. They send it to Department B to finish the work, okay? And you'll see that example coming up very soon. But both Department A and Department B are going to take up certain materials, labor, and overhead. It's just allocated differently. Mhm. Once the Department A is done with its part and send it to Department B, and Department B is done with its part, it becomes a finished good, goes to finished goods inventory, and of course, once it's sold to customers, it's cost of goods sold. So we're gonna look at this difference here today. Again, some similarities and differences are also listed here. They basically have, in terms of similarities, right? It's a manufacturing business. They accumulate raw materials, labor, overhead, and there's a flow of costs that you just saw. But there are some significant differences in terms of the work in process accounts that are used. We're going to see some differences there. The documents that they use in process costs is different than what you saw in some of the documents for job order costing in Chapter 2. The point at which all those costs are totaled up is a little different. And then, of course, because you're making very similar products with very similar amounts of materials and labor and overhead, we actually calculate the unit cost differently. And you'll see that next week. And this is just a nice little illustration of what we just talked about, okay? For work in process, there's one work in process account in the job order cost system that you saw in Chapter 2. What you'll see in process cost system in this one in Chapter 3 is there's actually multiple accounts, usually by department, as the example will be. Documents that have been used, you saw those job cost sheets in Chapter 2. What you're going to see is a production cost report that you're going to need to learn and do next week. Okay. When's the total cost determined in a job order system for each job? But for a process cost system, they wait for the end of a period of time to calculate the total costs. And then, of course, the cost computations, unit cost computations, here it's per job divided by the units produced, and that's the cost. What they do in process cost system that you'll see next week is they take the total amount of costs and they divide it by what they call an equivalent unit. And you'll learn about that again next week. Okay, so this is the end of learning objective 1. There's really not, again, it's an introduction to the differences between the two systems. This particular example is in your book. A law firm is likely to use process costing for major lawsuits. Well, no, that's false, because they would probably use the job order system. Because for a major lawsuit, there's going to be a lot more time, resources put into that than just your general, smaller, lawsuit that they would take. A manufacturer of paintballs would likely use the process cost system. Again, paintballs, if you're manufacturing paintballs, it's basically the same product. Right? So that would be true because the process system works for manufacturing a large amount of the same type of product. Okay. Both the job order and the process cost system determine the costs at the end of the period. No, that's not true. We know the job order system processes the total costs once the job is done. But process cost system that we just learned about calculates the cost at the end of a period of time. So that's why that's false. Process costing does not keep track of manufacturing overhead. That's false because they all do. Okay. They're keeping track of materials, labor, and overhead. No differences there. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a moment.